Being a lawyer, it's been amazing. It's completely switched my brain to where I go through life with the skill set of knowing that I can negotiate, that I can collaborate, knowing that I can read the fine print and understand exactly what's being asked of me. It's not a bad look when people, whether it's family or friends, get to throw around you'll hear from my lawyer. And just obviously the substance of having a prestigious career attached to my name is also really, really nice. One of the things that's really important about the law is being able to fall in love with the law. I really, really love the dynamics of getting to understand how to argue and the different approaches and ultimate dispute resolution. What I found in some of my peers that made them successful is, first and foremost, kind of like this want and this need to help other people. Part of being a lawyer is being a counselor. I think anybody can do law school. If law school was free, I think that there are many people out there that have the ability to just go in, learn the case law, learn the material, and walk out as a lawyer. It's not necessarily hard to comprehend. It's more so just having the work ethic to kind of put your head down, work your ass off, and finish.
Medicine,
law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nick. You're listening to Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area. Welcome back to the Medico-Legal Brief, everyone. We're excited for you to join us for another episode here today. Our previous episode, we went over all the reasons why Lawyer Nick left the law behind and pursued new interests. But today's episode is going to be dedicated into the reasons why he still loves the law and why maybe one day he'll be potentially testing it back out. I'm excited to hear more of your thoughts and why you think you would push other new students into law.
When we talk about negatives or positives, at least in other episodes about other subjects or categories, some of our listeners or people in general think that because a negative exists, the exact opposite doesn't exist. So when you were talking about practicing family medicine and the negatives you experience on a day-to-day basis, I bet there were a bunch of listeners saying, oh my gosh, he absolutely hates being a family medicine physician and doing family practice. And then we release what you love about it the next week, and all of a sudden, here's all the reasons why Dr. Long loves doing it. So I appreciate the opportunity to have a little bit of a vent session from last week. I know I towed the line as to what I disliked about it, but I'm excited to really talk about what I actually do love about the law.
Yeah. And again, for our listeners who have not been following us through this podcast journey, Lawyer Nick is actually still licensed in Texas, and he keeps up with all the requirements to maintain that. Obviously, he still has a foot in the door. And then the other thing is he's a adjunct professor at his old law school. So again, lots of different avenues that still maintains him within the field of law, but maybe not practicing purely as an attorney.
Yeah, and with that, I like still being connected to the law, and I'll jump right into it. I've mentioned this before when I'm giving advice to people that want to go to law school or people that are in law school. One of the things that's really important about the law is being able to fall in love with the law. I know I went to law school to pursue other avenues, that being the FBI, but while I was there, I truly loved the law. I loved the case law. I loved the classes. I really, really loved the dynamics of getting to understand how to argue and the different approaches and ultimate dispute resolution, which is what I primarily focus on now, which is negotiations and mediations. It was so enlightening, and we've talked about our school and our education brainwashing us. You in medicine and me in law, you go through this schooling process and they break you down and they build you back up into something that is completely different than what you went into. In the 3 years that I was in law school, although the end goal wasn't to pursue something with me actually being a lawyer, I did everything during law school to try to put me in the best position to be a lawyer if everything else fell apart in my application process to do other things.
Then I have a question for you in terms of what would make a good lawyer. Is it someone that enjoys arguing, winning? What would you say pulled you into that direction? Because obviously you could have done a lot of different things and you could have studied different types of law, but what do you feel like pulled you into that, specifically law, and also your colleagues? What did you feel like the personalities of the colleagues that you studied with? Was it that winning mentality, like they had to win every argument no matter what scenario it was, and that's what makes a good lawyer? Or is it more of curiosity, learning the details, the nitty-gritty, and parsing out a very thought out argument?
When you are talking to people that are considering law school, or you're talking to younger individuals, younger students in high school, or even kids, right? Why do you want to be a lawyer? A lot of times you hear, it's because I like to argue. I like to argue. I like to argue. So and so likes to argue, so they'll make the best attorney. And I was told that a few times too before I ever got to law school. But that's not all that it's about. Arguing is a big point of it, and there can be contentious debate, there can be collaborative conversation. There are a lot of different elements that revolve around arguing in a courtroom. But not everybody goes into litigation. Other aspects that make somebody successful as a lawyer, or that you can fall in love with: being very analytical, doing research. Being a lawyer has a lot of research tied to it, where you are reading a lot, you're reading a lot of case law, you're making a lot of analogies to that case law for what you're looking at. If you're doing transactional work, you're wordsmithing. So if you're working on contracts, you're really going through the language with a fine tooth comb. There are all these other aspects of the law that's just not arguing in a courtroom. What I found in some of my peers that made them successful is, first and foremost, this want and this need to help other people. Of being a lawyer is being a counselor. I mean, that's why they call us counselors, because that's kind of part of our job function, where we are counseling people through their legal issues and legal obstacles in hopes that we can put them in the best possible position on the other side. Whether that's helping somebody with their will or their trust, or starting a small business and making sure their small business paperwork is in order. There's so many different things there in which we're helping people. And I saw that a lot in the peers, or at least my close friends from law school, where obviously you want to be a successful lawyer, but there's also this need and this want to help those who are in need. And I think that's important.
I feel like that holds so true, because obviously, as medical school and why we want to become physicians, there's always that question: why do you want to do this? And the answer is always because we want to help people. Like you have already brought up, there are so many different careers out there where you are helping patients, where you are helping clients and people just in a different facet of their life. And so I'm always trying to think, am I ever interested in the law? And so when I hear you talk about the law, I try to put myself in your shoes and see whether or not I have those same pulls and interests. Because like you said, you like to read. I do like to read, but I'm not sure if I would like to read like law books and reading all the details of something that's so old and trying to decipher whether or not it's something that can be upheld to today's standards or not. Is that something that you considered prior to getting into law school, or was that something that just came with it once you made it in? How much prep work did you know you were getting into once you got into law school?
Honestly, I didn't have a lot of prep work going in. I had read a few intro books. There's one famous book out there called 1L. It's a real story about a student as he went through his first year at Harvard Law School. I think the book was written in the 70s. And so I read that to get an understanding, an idea of what I'd expect. But I didn't realize it was going to be so research driven. I didn't realize that there would be as much reading as there was. I expected it, but I did not actually comprehend the amount that we would go through, as well as some of the ways that they teach the Socratic method, being called upon in class randomly, seating charts, standing up and briefing cases. I didn't really know to expect all that because I didn't have any lawyers in my family, and I really didn't have any mentors going in. But you learn really fast. Obviously, you do a little bit of an orientation. You come in and they're trying to put you in the best possible position to be a successful lawyer because it looks good for the school, it's good for the students, it's good for the faculty. They try to assist you along the way. But as far as when other people are considering law school, I think anybody can do law school. It's just obviously you have to pay the bill for it, right? But if law school was free, I think that there are many people out there that have the ability to just go in, learn the case law, learn the material, and walk out as a lawyer. It's not necessarily hard to comprehend. It's more so just having the work ethic to put your head down, work your ass off, and finish. When you talk about could you have ever done it, I truly believe with your personality type, with your due diligence, with your work ethic, you could be a lawyer. And the one thing that is interesting about you being a lawyer is that you do have a love for politics. You are very engaged with what's going on in politics, either at your local level or at the national level. And you're very involved with knowing about what's going on and geopolitically with the government and what's going on across the world. That's also part of law school because a lot of politicians are lawyers. Whether you're a lobbyist, whether you're a politician, whether you're working on Capitol Hill, a lot of those people are lawyers because in order to be successful as a politician, you have to understand how the law works, whether it's how it's implemented, how it's written, how bills are passed, so on and so forth. You could have been a pretty good lawyer if you ever want to make a career switch.
Yeah, definitely not. Never, ever do I ever want to go back to school. I think I'm pretty good with the continuing education that I have already, just being where I'm at. But I think you're kind of underselling law school and becoming a lawyer because obviously there's a very big name celebrity out there that did go through law school. She passed, but she didn't actually pass the bar in her state. We all know Kim Kardashian. That was a whole big thing. She obviously has the finances to fund her education, but it clearly does take some smarts and some dedication to the field. It's not just any willy-nilly person off the street can go in, become a lawyer. I mean, that's case in point right there, is that someone that has millions and billions of dollars was able to get through law school, but still can't pass the bar after multiple attempts. So you're underselling it a little bit, but I appreciate you really propping myself up because yes, I could pursue it one day, but I really don't want to. I'll leave it up to you.
Well, you know what's wild about the Kim Kardashian thing? In Texas, in order to become a lawyer, you have to go to a state bar accredited law school. You got to go to law school to be a lawyer. In California, you don't need to actually go to law school to be a lawyer. So there are a lot of individuals, a lot of criminals in the justice system over in California that are currently imprisoned that end up becoming lawyers because I almost want to say it's like a desperation, right? A lot of them don't have a lot of money and a lot of them have a lot of time. So what they'll do is they'll just research and read and research and read and really over the course of so many years put their head down. They'll take the bar while they're in prison and then they'll become attorneys. And then in some instances, they'll even represent themselves as they move forward within their own cases, whether they're trying to work an appeal, whether they have other charges against them. Maybe there's a little bit of hunger that needs to exist there to where you feel the desperation that you need to pass the bar in order to successfully become a lawyer.
What else about law interests you? I mean, again, I never thought of it as a career, but you clearly have. What does the field bring to your life or your personal life that was so captivating?
Outside of helping people, obviously, when I came out, I went into family law for a few years and I enjoyed family law because it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was all the crazy stories that you could imagine. It was all the emotional nuances. You were helping families. You know, you obviously with your husband went through an adoption. We did adoptions. There were other times in which we had to find a way to, pull the children away because being with the parents wasn't necessarily in the best interest of the child. We had this full-blown dynamic as it relates to families, and these were all real-world situations that happen every day to every sort of family. Whether somebody passes away, somebody gets a divorce, somebody becomes age of 18 and they're no longer a kid and now they're out on their own. Family law is very, very dynamic. And I really like that aspect of it. You've mentioned it in your family medicine practice. Every day was a different day. It wasn't something in which I knew I was going to go to the same office, pull up the same contracts, do the same transactional work. It was on Monday, I'm in court in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I'm in a mediation. Tuesday, I'm in the office. Wednesday, we're driving down to Houston for a trial in the afternoon. Thursday, we're relaxing and just doing files. And then Friday, we're back in court for the morning and the afternoon. Every day was completely different and every week was completely different. We never knew what was going to walk through the door. We never knew what exciting case we were going to get. We never knew what exciting problem we were going to get. And like you had mentioned, you're putting the puzzle pieces together. When you have a patient in your room or you have a client in your office, you're asking these questions and you're trying to solve this problem and you're wondering, are they withholding information? Do I need to ask more questions to pull it out? It's a pretty fun dynamic for somebody who has that inquisitive mind and wants to learn about things and then try to fix things.
Would you say that sort of variety is pretty standard amongst all or the majority of lawyers, or do you think it was just unique to your specific job in the firm that you worked in?
It just depends on what you do. For litigators, courtroom trial attorneys, that is pretty common. Whether you are a prosecutor, whether you're a defense attorney, whether you're doing big civil litigation, that is the norm where every day is different depending on your clientele. But then you also have the lawyers that are maybe doing clerkships for judges, or maybe they're just transactional, or they're in-house counsel where they're going to the same office in the same building, and they will do that for as long as they're at the company. And they don't have to engage with anybody. There's actually some lawyers that pick transactional work specifically because they don't want to work with other people. They don't want the front facing with the clientele. They don't want to have to go to meetings. They just are maybe a little bit more introverted. And so they're okay working documents and sending emails all day back and forth. And that's where their safe place is. But I couldn't imagine doing something like that. I need it every day to be different. But for those looking at what position I want to be at when I'm finally a lawyer, we obviously have a podcast that covers the different categories with both medicine and law. But you can be transactional and be a little bit more introverted, or in-house counsel and be a little bit more calm and working your 40 hours. Or you could be a litigator and every day is a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, that's interesting that you're saying that there are some lawyers who are introverts that can still be lawyers, watching TV, knowing you. I feel like most lawyers should or need to be extroverts, need to be social, because they're constantly dealing with the public, with clients, with judges, and being able to not only manipulate the situation, but also be able to handle the situation appropriately. Do you feel like that was something that pulled you towards being a lawyer? Because, I mean, Nick, growing up, you always thrived being center of attention, thrived being in the middle of like that big social group, making the decisions, being the leader. Would you say that that was something that pulled you towards the law too? Because you knew maybe one day you could be like this big name lawyer?
Not necessarily pulling me towards the law, but pulling me towards litigation. Litigation scares a lot of students because you're getting up in front of a courtroom, you're getting up in front of a jury, getting up before a judge, and you're making arguments. And I preface this with, if you listen to the last podcast, that same stress level is what ended up pushing me out of the law. But in trying to get into being a litigator, I was like, well, you know what? If I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be the type of lawyer that you see on TV. Because for the most part, a majority of the lawyers are in those very, I'm not going to say low stress situations, because being a lawyer is pretty stressful, just like being any sort of physician is probably very stressful. But the more even keel legal job, that's where most people will stay. Having the comfortable office, going over contracts, just meeting with clients, not going all over the place. Litigation is one of the primary things that people see. It's a very sexy part of the law, but there aren't a lot of lawyers that end up ultimately going into the courtroom.
It's kind of blowing my mind because now I just have this idea or this image of a lawyer majority of the time, 80% of the time being in the courtroom, and then 20% of the time doing the back end stuff, doing the research, talking to clients in their office. So you're kind of blowing my mind in the fact that that's the reality of it.
Well, here's a good example. If I look at my friends that are in my lawyer group, right, one of them is in court all day, every day, because he does a lot of criminal defense. One of them works for a record label. He is general counsel for the record label. He does contractual work for the record label out in Tennessee. Another one does wills and estates. So he's drafting wills, he's doing estate planning. And another one does civil litigation at a big firm. And so when you're looking at just those four people, 50% of them are seeing a courtroom. The other 50% are doing transactional work that they enjoy. And then you can keep going down the line. One of my other buddies, he took a similar approach to me where he got out, he wanted to do intellectual property. And after a while, he said, you know what, I want to do something else. And he ended up going to go work for the federal government as a contractor. Everybody just sees in the books and in the movies and the TV that lawyer that's screaming in the courtroom, and they think, oh, that's what it is to be a lawyer. But when you look at the need for certain lawyers and what they do, a lot of them don't actually ever see the courtroom.
Got it. What else about law interests you, and what pulls you back in potentially one day?
The other thing about law that really, really interests me is the fact that it's challenging and things change constantly. And like I said, it's a puzzle, but you have to figure out how you're going to navigate the scene in front of you. When we go through hypotheticals and you throw the, hey, this happened and that happened, who's at fault? Really siphoning that out is really exciting. And then knowing that you have the skill set to go in and make an impact. We've talked about at Texas A&M School of Law. I'm an adjunct professor in our ADR department, so alternate dispute resolution. And what my primary job function is I teach students how to negotiate and mediate and client counsel and take them to competitions. Then they could compete on the law school level win awards, and really learn firsthand how to manage those skills and apply those skills. And that's something I absolutely love. I love negotiating. I love being collaborative. I love working together towards a problem. When we're looking at mediations or we look at working with clients and counseling those clients through their certain issues and how to respond to certain inquiries, that also excites me. Again, because it's not necessarily that everything has to be a war. You can be collaborative and both sides can achieve their goals and you can work together towards that common goal, but also being able to have the backbone where if everything gets set on fire, you know that you're confident in your skills to then either step back into the courtroom or go litigate, or even take a very firm position in a negotiation, have that argument on that front.
I feel like the commonality from the beginning of our conversation to now is that everything that pulls you into law is also things that can push you out of the law. Similarly to medicine, the things that I go into medicine for, being able to make relationships, create relationships with patients, are the same reasons that could burn me out because there are some relationships that are just so draining. Imagine the same thing with clients is that there are some clients you enjoy working with and you can't wait to go in and help these clients and get them to their goals. But then there are some clients that are just a drain, I'm sure. Any sort of advice that you might have to be able to mitigate that? Is it just avoiding those types of personalities altogether? Or is it finding a firm that will support you in work-life balance? How do you find that balance for our viewers? What sort of advice do you have for them to be able to have a longer career than maybe you had?
I think that finding a firm or a company or, a mentor boss that really takes into consideration your work-life balance and also having the wherewithal to understand what your work-life balance is. We both know that when we started our schooling and then came out into our careers, we were younger individuals. We didn't have significant others. We didn't have kids, but having the foresight to understand if that's something I want in the future, or if I want my vacation time, or if I want time spent with my family or friends or time to travel, you have to be able to understand how you're going to fit that in to your career and whether or not that firm or that place of business or that place of work will allow it or they won't allow it. So establishing work-life balance, understanding what your PTO is, how you can use it, but also trying to find boundaries, not making yourself so available to where you actually burn yourself out. Because what I've found out in the law and my career at Lockheed Martin and other instances of work that I've done in the past is that when you have a work ethic and you work really, really hard and you make yourself always available to try to be the best you could be for your colleagues and peers, somebody is ultimately going to take advantage of that. And then at the point where you try to put down the brakes and establish those boundaries, then you are looked down upon or you are looked upon negatively by the other people because that's not your normal work ethic. So when you've already established your cadence and then you try to throttle back, people are more likely to look down upon it instead of thinking, oh, maybe he's burnt out, or maybe we worked him too hard, or maybe we've asked too much of him without giving stuff back. And I think that it's very important to understand that dynamic and be open and honest and have those conversations. At the law firm I was at, in family law stuff doesn't happen in normal business hours. As a family medicine physician, you get calls in the middle of the night. You get text messages in the middle of the night. You have your emails blowing up or your portal blowing up because something has happened. And then this cannot wait because there are dire circumstances if I wait an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. Sometimes you can't escape the clientele. You can try to pick them, but it's hard to pick the right ones.
Well, I don't really want to end the episode on a negative note. So I'm going to kind of try to pull this back into a positive light because I feel like every time we talk about the law, the thing that you always bring up, that common theme that I always hear is you're always talking about the colleagues you work with, the classmates you graduated with, and just the team that supported you or that you supported. Is that something that holds true for most lawyers? Is that the team that carries you through the day to day? And that's what keeps most people excited, happy, is to be part of this very small group of lawyers and attorneys?
I'm going to go back to a term you used a few episodes ago, and it's trauma bonding. With my friends from law school, we went through the trauma together. And so when we get back together, whether we go on a trip or we meet up for dinner or what have you, we revisit that trauma And then we talk about current events in the law and what's going on in everybody's day to day. And I genuinely miss that because in my normal day to day, when I'm talking to non-lawyers or I'm working at Lockheed with people that come from many different backgrounds, supply chain and engineering and MBAs, you don't get the same conversation that you're brainwashed to in law school. My trauma bonding was with the students. But you can hear with some of the other law firms, bigger law firms, that other associate attorneys, they have that same trauma bonding with the people that they work with. I hear from my friends that they're in the trenches every single day. And it's just like anything else. You either really, really like the people you work with or you really, really dislike the people that you work with. But those people that you work with can really make or break your work-life balance and your experience in that career. If I was to ever go back into the law, which every single year, I always wonder, okay, should I jump back in and try my hand at in-house counsel or transactional work, or maybe even dip my toe back into being a litigator? One thing that I'm always thinking about is what type of environment am I going to pick out? And is that something that will allow me to appreciate my position as a lawyer and ultimately lead to more success? And I think that those exist out there. You just really have to find them.
Any final thoughts on what really should be pulling our viewers into law, reasons why you stayed in it for as long as you did, and whether or not anyone interested in going into the law should really consider?
I think just going back, I absolutely love the law. You are either going to have to learn to love the law or just love the law going in. Anybody who thinks that they're just going to go to law school because they like to debate, that's not what it's all about. You have to like to read, you have to like to research. And then after 3 years of, really busting your ass, you really want to figure out how you want to apply your JD, your law degree. And if you end up taking the bar and passing the bar, how you want to practice as a lawyer and what impact you're going to have. Granted, if you have the funds and money just lying around like Kim Kardashian, maybe it's an expensive hobby for you, but realistically, you gotta have that forethought to plan out the rest of your life because it's an investment not only of your time and resources, but of your emotional state. It's an investment of what you put your family and friends through. And so you want to make sure it's all worth it. But being a lawyer, it's been amazing. It's completely switched my brain to where I go through life with the skill set of knowing that I can negotiate, that I can collaborate, knowing that I can read the fine print and understand exactly what's being asked of me. It's not a bad look when family or friends get to throw around you'll hear from my lawyer. And just, obviously the substance of having a prestigious career attached to my name is also really, really nice. There's so many different things of value from just being a lawyer and how your brain works and how you can navigate life that it's definitely worth it if you can get through it. And for those that are struggling in law school right now and they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's there. Keep going, put your head down and work. And when you get out, it'll be one of the most amazing things that you ever have gone through.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Nick. I think it's always a interesting and fruitful conversation when we get together and have these conversations. It was a nice glimpse into your thought process, but also the reasons why law would be enticing for some people. And so hopefully it's helpful for our viewers out there. But again, this was another episode here on the Medico-Legal Brief with lawyer Nick and me, Dr. Long. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure that you follow us on our social medias. We drop an episode Wednesdays at 10 Central Time. But again, thank you for joining us here on the Medico-Legal Brief. Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.